This part 1 video discusses the known and unknown history of abortion in the United States and the global conspiracy behind it, in view of the likely US Supreme Court decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. Hello friends, this is Unmasked Truth with Harmanjit Saini, where I provide unique analysis of world events based on the unmasked truth that after surrender, Germany continued World War II clandestinely and became a killing machine. I also provide true news that you will find nowhere else. The U.S. Supreme Court is expected to issue a ruling in the Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization abortion case later in June 2022 or early July 2022. A draft of the opinion by Justice Alito was leaked, which showed that the court's 5 conservative justices are likely to overturn the landmark 1973 Roe v. Wade decision that federally protected the right to an abortion in the United States. There have been demonstrations by both sides which shows that passions are running high. If the final opinion is close to the leaked draft, then right to an abortion would not be federally protected, but states will be free to enact their own laws. This means that conservative states could make abortion illegal, whereas it would remain legal in Democrat-ruled states. Women seeking an abortion would have to go to another state if it is illegal in their state. So let's briefly review the history of abortion in the United States. Accepted history shows that 4 parties, the government, meaning legislative bodies and courts, women, medical practitioners, and religion, have been involved in the debates concerning abortion policy. Historically, for thousands of years, a small number of women have sought to limit the number of children they bore. They did this through prevention of pregnancy, abortion, and infanticide. It was practiced by the ancient Egyptians, Persians, Romans, Indians, and other civilizations. But why does society generally consider abortion as immoral? For example, the Hippocratic Oath that guided ethics among physicians prohibited them from inducing elective abortions. Some church fathers in the 200s disapproved of the use of contraceptives, drugs, or use of devices for the purpose of abortions. Concerning early American colonial history, a United Church of God article states, Pilgrim and Puritan founders of colonial America, along with Lutherans and Anglicans, saw abortion as murderous. New England was filled with Presbyterian and Congregationalist churches founded on the doctrines of John Calvin, who wrote that an unborn child, though enclosed in the womb of his mother, is already a human being and should not be robbed of the life which it has not yet begun to enjoy. Thus, society viewed abortion as a sin, but it was not specifically legislated against because it was extremely rare. Social pressure on a woman and her ostracization if she got pregnant outside of marriage were brutal and meant a bleak future, leading such women to seek to end their pregnancy before it was discovered. It was worse than a death sentence because she would have to live almost her entire life shunned or put down by society, unforgiven, discriminated against in every aspect of life, never ever being able to hope of reaching her potential, probably unable to ever marry and lead a normal life. Worse still, her child would be ostracized and taunted for much of his or her life. Watching the pain and suffering of her child would further increase her anguish, leading to a life of never ending pain and suffering. Even the man involved and the woman's family probably advised her to get an abortion to preserve her and the family's honor. In rare cases, women or families may have wanted to end a pregnancy because they would have been unable to care for the additional child, but potentially being brutally shunned by friends, near relatives, and rest of society was the primary reason for ending an unwanted pregnancy. An article on the Ohio State University website by Anna M. Peterson, titled From Commonplace to Controversial, The Different Histories of Abortion in Europe and the United States, provides some insights on how pregnancy and abortion were viewed till the early 19th century when laws concerning abortion began to be legislated. She states, for most of Western history, aborting an early pregnancy was considered a private matter controlled by women and was not a crime. At the turn of the 19th century, most people in Western Europe and the United States did not believe human life was present until a pregnant woman felt the first fetal movements, a phenomenon known to refer to as quickening. Before quickening, women took herbal abortifacients to end a pregnancy. Such practices were not considered abortion. In fact, the word abortion was confined to miscarriages that resulted after quickening. Medical doctors had trouble even verifying a pregnancy until the woman reported that quickening had occurred. Religious authorities such as the Roman Catholic Church also supported the idea that the soul was not present until a later stage of pregnancy. Although not official church doctrine, this belief was based on St. Augustine's 5th century interpretation of Aristotle that the soul enters the body only after the body is fully formed, some 40 days after conception for males and 80 days for females. Beginning in the early 1800s, abortion began to be legislated. Peterson states, early laws reflected the distinction between the quick and the non-quick fetus. In the United States and England, abortion was legal in the early 1800s as long as it was performed prior to quickening. During later stages of pregnancy, abortion was a crime, but distinct from other forms of murder and punished less harshly. At this time, the pregnant woman had significant power in defining pregnancy, and the law was based on her bodily experience. But then, during the mid 1800s, as the number of abortions began to increase and medical knowledge improved, medical practitioners entered the abortion debate. Quickening began to be discredited as an unscientific indication of fetal life, and doctors began to assert themselves as the experts on pregnancy and fetal development. Doctors began to recognize that human life begins at conception. Therefore, they lobbied state governments to change the law to outlaw abortion at all stages of pregnancy. The British made abortion illegal in 1861 with the passage of the Offences Against the Person Act. In the United States, the newly created American Medical Association initiated an anti abortion campaign in 1857 as part of its efforts to professionalize obstetrics and fight against competition from homeopaths and midwives. Doctors also joined forces with religious authorities. Their views on fetal development led the Roman Catholic Church to change its views. In 1869, Pope Pius IX changed Catholic doctrine by stating that an embryo was a human being with a soul from the time of conception and that abortion performed at any stage of pregnancy would warrant excommunication. In 1895, a papal decree condemned therapeutic, meaning life-saving, abortions also. The result of the medical community joining forces with religious authorities was that abortion was outlawed by the states in the United States between 1860 and 1880. Thus, by 1800, abortion was viewed as the taking of human life, an immoral and illegal act. While abortion was made illegal, women continued to have back alley abortions and illegally performed by some doctors under the guise of therapeutic abortions. In the United States, authorities began to arrest illegal abortion providers, meaning mainly homeopaths and midwives, further pushing women to have unsafe abortions, resulting in more deaths. However, the thalidomide drug tragedy of the late 1950s began the shift in public opinion about abortion. For 5 years, the sedative thalidomide, manufactured and marketed by a German drug company, Chemie Grunenthal, whose head of research, Dr. Heinrich Müchter, was a Nazi war criminal. It was prescribed to pregnant women for morning sickness till in December 1961 it was withdrawn from the market in the United Kingdom after it was established that the medicine caused babies to be born with underdeveloped arms and legs and other malformations, and also caused 10,000 miscarriages and infant deaths. Globally, an estimated 20,000 malformed babies were born and 80,000 died. A BBC report of 2011 about thalidomide says Grun- Grunenthal patented thalidomide in the mid 1950s, but investigations in the past 2 years have confirmed that the German brand name Contargen was owned by the French pharma company Rhone Poulenc during the early 1940s when it was effectively under Nazi control. It's also now becoming clear that Grunenthal was part of a post war network of German scientists and businessmen who had played leading roles during the Nazi era. Immediately after the war, for example, Grunenthal employed Dr. Heinrich Müchter as chief scientist, who was sought in Poland on charges of war crimes after conducting medical experiments in prison camps, during which hundreds of prisoners may have died. I am always distrustful of all German made products and German masqueraders and never buy them because almost all Germans and masqueraders have the Nazi mindset. Though thalidomide was banned in December 1961 in the United Kingdom and women warned about its use in May 1962, fear of babies being born with deformities heated up the debate on legalizing abortion in the United States. In the 1950s and 60s, women and some reform minded doctors formed abortion reform movements. Then doctors joined forces with lawyers to expand the conditions under which women could legally procure abortions. Their movements resulted in 15 states legalizing abortions from 1967 to 1970 for pregnancies that resulted from rape or incest or threatened the life of the mother. Then, in the 1973 Roe v. Wade abortion case, the U.S. Supreme Court struck down all state laws regulating abortion, legalizing it throughout the country. The AMA, American Medical Association, was formed in 1847. It was in the vanguard of the debate and fight to convince government leaders and the public uh, that human life began at conception and to make abortion illegal. Here are AMA's views on abortion in the late 19th century and early 20th century as stated by Anna Peterson in her Ohio State University article. The AMA argued that abortion was a moral issue and insisted it was doctors' Christian duty to educate others about the immorality of abortion. Chairman of the AMA section on obstetrics, J. Milton Duff, described abortion in 1893 as a pernicious crime against God and society. In 1915, Chicago Circuit Court Judge John P. McGootey echoed these views. He wrote, "A woman who would destroy life in that manner is not fit for decent society." Now, here are AMA's views on abortion just 3 days after the leak of the draft of the Supreme Court opinion on Roe v. Wade from a statement it released, expressing its concern over what a final ruling would mean for government interference in the patient-physician relationship. This is from the healthcarefinancenews.com. The American Medical Association is deeply concerned by the contents and implications of the draft Supreme Court opinion for the Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization case that became public this week, said Dr. Gerald Harman, president of the AMA. This opinion would lead to government interference in the patient physician relationship, dangerous intrusion into the practice of medicine, and potentially criminalizing care. The Supreme Court draft opinion, reported by Politico late Monday, strikes down Roe v. Wade in a Mississippi abortion ban case the justices heard in December 2021. Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization is an appeal of a lower court ruling that said the state law banning abortion after 15 weeks of pregnancy was unconstitutional. With the deliberations underway, we strongly urge the court to reject the premise of the draft opinion and affirm precedent that allows patients to receive the critical reproductive health care that they need, Harman said. Allowing the lawmakers of Mississippi or any other state to substitute their own views for a physician's expert medical judgment puts patients at risk, and is antithetical to public health and sound medical practices. The AMA and more than 2 dozen medical organizations had filed an amicus brief or friend of the court brief in the Mississippi case with the Supreme Court saying abortion is a safe, common, and essential component of health care. According to a July 2, 2019 NPR.com article, abortion was not an issue for the group in the first half of the 20th century. The AMA became best known for successful fights to fend off a national health insurance system. Leading up to Roe v. Wade, the 1973 Supreme Court decision that legalized abortion nationwide, the AMA softened its opposition. In 1970, the AMA board called for abortion decisions to be between a woman and her doctor, but the organization declined to submit a friend of the court brief to the higher court during its consideration of Roe. So, what led to the change in AMA's attitude towards abortion from the early 20th century and even from 1970, when it considered abortion to be a moral issue and insisted it was doctors' Christian duty to educate others about the immorality of abortion and that it was a pernicious crime against God and society, to its current opinion that abortion is a safe, common, and essential component of healthcare? That history will not be found written anywhere in America. As mentioned earlier, the women's and doctors' reform movements of the late 1950s and 60s resulted in 15 states legalizing abortions from 1967 to 70 for pregnancies that resulted from rape or incest or threatened the life of the mother. Those dates are very significant because German masqueraders, who were people of German ancestry living in white countries, German masqueraders living in the United States were becoming successful in spreading their tentacles in the United States, and their clandestine continuation of the Second World War was already in full swing. Germany surrendered unconditionally to end World War II. The Nazis had already concluded by August 1944 that the war could not be won and had decided to go underground after the war and continue fighting it clandestinely. At the end of the war, conditions were extremely favorable for the Germans. They had German masqueraders in control of government in the United States with Harry Truman as president, in the United Kingdom with Clement Attlee as prime minister, and in Russia with Joseph Stalin as Communist Party boss. Just 2 years after the end of the war, these German masqueraders left the task of denazifying Germany to the German government. Very soon, Nazis disguised as technocrats embedded in top German corporations were back in power. The Nazis already had contacts in America because of joint patents held by German and American firms at the end of the war. The task of identifying other German masqueraders in America was made extremely easy because from 1945 to 1961, till the end of President Eisenhower's term as president, they ruled America continuously, appointed masqueraders to the highest positions they could, who appointed other masqueraders as their subordinates. From April 1945, at the end of Truman's term, till August 1974, at Nixon's resignation, German masqueraders ruled America except for the 2 years and 10 months rule of President John F. Kennedy from January 20, 1961 to his assassination on November 22, 1963. The USA had brought German scientists to the United States to work on its space, ICBM, and nuclear weapons programs. They and German masqueraders were clandestinely sharing all scientific secrets with the Germans, who were developing their own nuclear weapons and ICBMs in China. They succeeded in developing both by 1960 and also made another technical breakthrough in being able to communicate with humans electronically directly into their ears. They were to use that technology to the hilt to control Americans of non-German ancestry. They tested the technology on the President of the United States, John F. Kennedy, by threatening him and his cabinet members. We can gauge their success in building a huge network of German masqueraders in powerful positions in America from the fact that they were successful in assassinating President Kennedy as a warning to anyone who would not obey them as directed through electronic communication directly into their ears. The Nazi goal has always been to rule the world as they consider themselves as the master race. This is not a laughing matter but a reality. The German masqueraders fought the American Civil War to carve out a country for themselves in America. They were not successful. Their goal in continuing the Second World War clandestinely has been to take over the entire country for themselves by exterminating whites of non German ancestry. That process began in earnest around 1960 after Germany had developed the nuclear weapons and ICBMs in China. The number of German masqueraders in America by that time involved in the effort numbered in the tens of millions. They infiltrated every American institution, including the AMA. The German masqueraders' goal was to destroy American white society morally and kill as many as possible, severely limit their population growth, or even make it negative before waging a full scale civil war on them to exterminate them and take over the country. The goal was nothing short of that because whites of Israelite descent, meaning of non German ancestry, would never voluntarily accept the Germans as their masters. The masqueraders could get away with anything because we thought they were simply a part of us and we had absolutely no knowledge that they existed or of their clandestine agenda. We thought we were all Americans. It was also the time of the Cold War with the threat of nuclear annihilation of humanity and the Vietnam War, hence making it easy to buy into the masqueraders' propaganda by all that the older generation had messed up, leading to rebellion against all authority. Of course, German masqueraders, being actively led by Satan the devil, fact which they no longer hide, became active in denying and rejecting the authority and moral teachings of Judeo Christianity and the Bible. They argued that such beliefs had got us into the mess in the first place. One has to remember that Satan and his human minions are a propaganda juggernaut. Satan was able to brilliantly palm off his theory of evolution hoax to virtually all of humanity. He did so by using a few German masqueraders like Charles Darwin and other scientists strategically located in the leading countries of Europe, loudly advocating the theory, which gave the impression that it was a very scientific theory leading to widespread acceptance. Then, of course, the tens of millions of masqueraders in white countries lent their support. Those with an opposing view were silenced by labeling them as unscientific, ignorant idiots, banned from academia and from publishing in leading academic journals, and were not hired in teaching and research positions in leading universities or given tenure. Denigrating the American and British Judeo Christian religion and labeling the Bible as myths and tales of donkey caravanners and ignorant medieval people forced people to question their Jewish and Christian religious beliefs. Morality as taught in the Bible began to be rejected. German masqueraders are morally lawless themselves. Their philosophy is anything goes or win any which way you can. But they were considered to be part of us, Americans and Britons like the rest of us. So we were unable to discover that there was a hidden agenda in all their lawless behavior, meaning contrary to the morality taught in the Bible. They started rejecting the moral authority of the Bible openly by advocating and practicing so called free love, which involved rampant sexual promiscuity, having any kind of sex one feels like with many casual partners. Easy access to birth control pills further fueled the decadent, sexually promiscuous lifestyle, which was widely promoted in movies, TV shows, smutty magazines such as Playboy and Hustler, subverting and severely weakening the institutions of marriage and family, which are the foundations of a stable and strong society. And the masquerader legal bulldog, the American Civil Liberties Union, or the ACLU, fought hard, sparing no expense, to keep all this ever worsening filth legal to continue subverting biblical marriage. and family in America. Despite the availability of birth control pills and other contraceptives, sexual promiscuity was bound to result in more unwanted pregnancies. A demand for abortions increased. A resistance to abortion also reduced in society because the threat of nuclear annihilation, teachings of the theory of evolution, and masquerade of propaganda against religion and the Bible in particular had led to a growing belief that there was no godly purpose for human life. Though demand for abortions had increased, it was still illegal. But women's movements, the AMA, and lawyers' movements had started their propaganda to make abortions legal. As already mentioned, some states began passing laws to make abortions legal. 15 had done so between 1967 to 1970, making it legal for pregnancies that resulted from rape or incest or threatened the life of the mother. But such piecemeal victories for masqueraders was very slow progress in fulfilling their agenda of curbing the growth of population of whites of non-German ancestry. They needed to make abortion legal throughout America, making it a constitutional right and restricting that right in any way as a violation of the Constitution. And only the US Supreme Court could do that. They were ready for the moment when the Roe v. Wade case went to trial in 1971. Masqueraders had 15 long years from the Truman presidency in 1945, excluding the 2 years and 10 months of the Kennedy administration, to the Nixon presidency till 1973 to control the constitution of the court when the Roe v. Wade decision legalizing abortion in all states was handed down. But even President Kennedy would have had no idea whether the men he appointed to the Supreme Court were German masqueraders or not. He thought all living in America were Americans united as citizens of one nation. Roe v. Wade decision was handed down by a 7-2 majority. The majority included Justices Blackmun, Douglas, Brennan, Stewart, Marshall, and Powell, joined by Chief Justice Warren Burger. Justices Byron White and William Rehnquist dissented. Chief Justice Burger and Justices Blackmun, Powell, and Rehnquist were appointed by President Nixon. Justice Thurgood Marshall was by President Lyndon Johnson. Justices Stewart and Brennan by President Eisenhower, all masquerader presidents. Justice William Douglas was appointed by President Franklin Roosevelt, and Justice Byron White was appointed by President John F. Kennedy. Thus, 7 of the 9 justices were appointed by German masquerader presidents. They knew that the US Supreme Court was packed by the German masquerader men. Thus, they were assured of a majority in the Roe v. Wade decision. That is how German masqueraders successfully made abortion legal and a constitutional right, and they were ready to fund it liberally through Planned Parenthood at taxpayer expense. Now masqueraders were ready to carry their agenda forward at a torrid pace to curb growth of white population of non-German ancestry. They used their technology to deliver threats electronically by forcing teenage girls and young women to have sex and get pregnant and force them to go to Planned Parenthood for counseling and abort their unborn babies, force interracial marriages and sex. They also forced young women of non-German ancestry to marry them, have 1 or 2 children, and then divorce them. Then, with threats, they were forced to live apart from family members so that many of these young women and their infants or toddlers were easily cremated alive in electric crematoriums. The death toll of those cremated alive from about 1970 to 2000 stands at 5 to 6 million. The death toll of aborted babies among whites of non-German ancestry from 1973 till today probably is of the order of 20 to 25 million. To this must be added the 3 to 4 million medical murders committed by German masqueraders and foreign doctors during the same time period. Germans and German masqueraders know how to do a thorough job. After they were confident of being able to defend themselves with their ICBMs and nuclear weapons in China, confident of controlling the American people by warning them to obey the threats issued to them electronically by assassinating President John F. Kennedy and his brother, presidential candidate Robert Kennedy, they were ready to implement their plan to begin murdering white Americans of non German ancestry. They started with the Charles Manson murders in August 1967. However, the US law enforcement response was quick and comprehensive to apprehend and successfully prosecute the murderers. The German masqueraders immediately recognized that they had to carry out their murders clandestinely and cover them up. They invented methods that would leave no trace of the victims. So they set up electric crematoriums when the prevailing American practice of dealing with the dead was to bury them. It was to be expected that people vanishing without a trace would be investigated. For that purpose, they infiltrated law enforcement, the justice system, and the welfare system so that single mothers with young children vanishing without a trace would not be thoroughly investigated. They did such a thorough job of covering up 5 to 6 million murders that from 1970 to 2000, nobody in America realized where all these missing adults and children had vanished to. Do you think the masqueraders would not do an equally thorough job of covering up the 3 to 4 million medical murders? They knew that the key to successfully murdering people medically and not be caught or prosecuted was getting control of the AMA. They also insisted that the government should not interfere between the doctor-patient relationship. The AMA vehemently opposed any such moves with the utmost vigor. Nobody could question the medical procedures performed or the medicines prescribed by doctors. If any doctor questioned another doctor, the AMA would be used to silence such dissent. That is how the masqueraders, with the help of the AMA, got away with 3 to 4 million medical murders. People even in government and the Congress were afraid to question what doctors did. The existence of German masqueraders began to be discovered around 1995 to 1996 with the help of electronic surveillance. The surveillance revealed that many doctors were likely engaged in murdering their patients with the medicines prescribed, the treatments given, or through unnecessary surgeries. But the US had a dilemma in proving that doctors were engaged in such practices. No American doctors could be expected to tell the truth. AMA would silence any such attempts with vociferous dissenting opinions. Masqueraders had also made sure that over a 25 to 30-year period, most of the doctors were masqueraders or foreign doctors brought in who were being threatened to commit the murders. The solution the Clinton administration had to use was to bring British doctors in as immigrants to monitor what American doctors were doing. That is how the insidious conspiracy to medically murder patients was discovered. This illustrates how thorough a job German masqueraders did, led by Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett since the early 1970s. They got away with medical murders and cremating people alive for more than 30 years. The AMA used the no interference in the doctor-patient relationship mantra to get away with medical murders. They have used the same mantra to perform 50 to 60 million abortions since the Roe v. Wade decision. AMA's words after the draft of the Supreme Court opinion was leaked are worth repeating. This opinion would lead to government interference in the patient-physician relationship, dangerous intrusion into the practice of medicine, and potentially criminalizing care. Once the masquerader decided abortion as a strategy to limit growth of population of whites of non-German ancestry, the AMA, taken over by the masqueraders, fiercely defended the right of women to have an abortion, especially after Roe versus Wade. That is why they don't want Congress legislating anything to restrict abortion in any way. Abortion is a lucrative business for some doctors, but that's not the reason they want to keep abortion legal, because they would probably make much more money delivering babies and with prenatal and postpartum care than performing abortions. They want to keep abortion legal because of their clandestine war against Americans of non German ancestry. That briefly is the true history of abortion in the United States, including the unwritten, yet the far more important history. The US Supreme Court leaked opinion on May 2, 2022 must be viewed with this historical backdrop. What the German masqueraders have done in the United States, they accomplished the same thing in the United Kingdom, France, and worst of all in Russia and the former Soviet Union states. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please continue to watch my videos and read my articles on important world events, World War III watch, politics, international business, advice on health and medical problems, and much more for in-depth and insightful analysis. Please also subscribe to my YouTube and Facebook channels, Unmasked Truth with Harmanjit Saini, to view and get information on the latest videos. Some people do not have the time to go through the full length of videos. They find it more convenient to read the text of the video. Unfortunately, YouTube does not provide the capability to make the text of my videos available on YouTube, but fortunately Facebook does provide that capability. So I make the text of my videos available on my Facebook channel, which you can easily copy.